consider that organizations spend $3 trillion annually on technology, and that only 13% of the projects are considered successful when they're completed. Change management really is something that we need to focus on. And from the HR perspective, we're often expected to bring some of that expertise. And goal of change management is to transform an organization from its current state to some future desired state. And we do that by applying knowledge, tools, resources in a systematic process. We have to understand that change takes time. Of course, there are some ways that we can accelerate the process of change, but we have to be careful because there is a natural ebb and flow of things. And if things are rushed, parts of the process may not be completed, and that may contribute to an ultimate failure to that change management process. So it's important that we remain disciplined about being planned and systematic in the process of change management. When we think about this goal we have for change management, it becomes clear that we rely on those in the organization to enact the changes, and ultimately the degree to which they buy into the change and intentionally move forward in the direction of the change, that can really have an effect. And we are naturally resistant to change in many circumstances. So, again, that reinforces the need for structure, the need to be careful in our planning, and to be systematic in our approach. Now, the process of change management is very systematic, and at times it can look like science because we're diagnosing situations and approaching change in a very systematic way and measuring the results. But there is also an art to change management, and ultimately, it's the change in the system that is important, not the knowledge or data that's generated as a result of that. It might be very good that we have those things, and we like to have those things, but ultimately we're trying to make meaningful change that helps the organization to fulfill its strategic goals. There's often a leader of change. Sometimes that person is thought of as a change agent. And again, the idea that this person needs to wear multiple hats. They have to be very systematic. They have to be very intentional in their planning, but they also have to communicate in a way that resonates and have a style that people have confidence in. There should be a good reason for change, and a gap analysis is a way to approach systematically, a way to look at all the different reasons we might want to change by looking at our current state, our current system, and compare that to the desired state, the desired system that we want, and to look at those differences, that gap. And that is often one of the most powerful ways that we can address resistance to change. Nobody likes change because we work hard to develop effective routines. They make our lives easier. They help us work together in many effective ways. So, routine can be our friend. However, sometimes our routines become obsolete, and the tools that we use in those routines become obsolete. And so we need to change. Your book talks about a lot of different factors in resistance to change, and it's important that we understand that. But first and foremost, if we do a diagnosis of the current state of affairs and the desired state of affairs and have a gap analysis, that is meaningful, it's accurate, it's valid, then that is something we can use in communicating not just with the executives in the organization that are making decisions, but also with those employees in the organization that we're trying to convince to buy into the change that's being proposed. Doing change management is not just executing a recipe like we would if we want to make a dessert, and sometimes these models might make it seem like that. It's step one, step two, step three. We really need to try and be attuned to the organizational culture and think about the particular context and the behavior of people in that context. If we can apply the change management process with that level of specific knowledge of the context, then we're much more likely to have a successful change. But again, it takes some skill to do that. And it takes some time to develop that sense and that knowledge of different change management models. These models come in different ways. They're not all interchangeable. Some provide us more of a framework for thinking about change management, in that they identify the topics that we should consider. And so these can be very good for us to use in a diagnostic way. And I think a great example of this is Nadler's congruence model. This is a model that's very useful to use early on in the change management process so that we can diagnose what are the root causes of the change that is needed, and how the system is operating and how we might use that to promote that change that we want to realize. Other models are showing us more the process. It's kind of a step-by-step guide. And Kotter's 8-stage change process model is a good example of that. And they help us to understand where along this process are we, and what should we be attending to now and in the near future. Again, we can look at other factors such as how it helps us to organize and interpret the data that is being generated for us to understand the context that we're trying to change. These models can provide a common language, and that's why it's useful to see what models have been used before or are used within the employee groups that we're partnering with on this change management project. It's important that we actually act on these models and that they guide us in our near term and our long term goals in terms of what actions we're going to take in the change management process. These aren't just rules of thumb that we might want to lightly gloss over. These should be things that guide our to-do list and structure our timeline, and actually are things where we evaluate, did we actually achieve this step in our change management model. Ultimately, which model is going to be used is, I don't think, as consequential as that we use a model and we apply it, and it's actually meaningful to the people that are using that model, that there's that shared language. Thus, when we are considering this, we may want to look at what models have been used in the past, what models people are familiar with, and we might just want to consider what is the best model, and maybe create a hybrid model. That's a great way to create buy-in. There is some commonalities in these different models, and I think they can be used in ways together to complement one another.